very, very critical global part, we definitely discuss global issues. Now today, without kind of wasting any more time, let me go directly to the issue that we'll be discussing today. That is the recent disaster in Uttarakhand. We call it Himalaya disaster because Uttarakhand to me is just a part of the big game. Before that, let me share with you that this program is brought on by the Climate Channel, a Canadian television channel, in collaboration with the Plurals Media channel and the notvbangla, a very, very formidable YouTube channel from Bangladesh. And also, I would like to introduce a very esteemed panel that I have with me this evening. I have with me, let me start with Professor Jayanta Bandyopadhyay, Distinguished Fellow, Observer Research Foundation, Kolkata, India, and he has been researching and working on mountains, Himalayan specific, if I'm not wrong, from 1988 onwards, was having a lot of responsibilities down the line. So welcome, Professor Bandyopadhyay, to the show.
Thank you. Thank you. And namaste to everyone.
Thank you. I have with me my colleague, my friend, Hridayesh Joshi, a very eminent environment journalist who actually was in Uttarakhand for last few days covering the issue. And we are really, really keen to know from Hridayesh how the ground level situation there. Welcome, Hridayesh, to the show. I know you were traveling on road. Thankful that you can still manage it. Welcome, Hridayesh, to the show.
Thank you, Jayanta. Thanks for having me on your show.
Great, great, Hridayesh. We have with us Professor Purnamita Dasgupta, Team Leader, Ecosystem Services, International Center for Integrated Mountain Development, that is ICIMOT. Everybody knows ICIMOT, Nepal. And also, she is the Professor of Institute of Economic Growth, Delhi. Welcome, Professor Dasgupta, to the show.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be amongst this
distinguished pleasure for all of us as well. We have with us Professor and Dr. Santosh K. Rai. Is a very, very eminent glaciologist and heading this section in Wadia Institute of Himalayan Geology, India. You are the person who have to answer a lot of questions, Professor Dr. Rai. So welcome to the show. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, everyone. And namaskar from India.
And very importantly, we have Professor Dr. Ajaya Dixit, Research Advisor, ISET-Nepal. He's also the visiting professor in various capacities in the Kathmandu School of Law and also a fellow of Niti Foundation. Welcome, Professor Dixit, to the show.
Hello, Jayanta, and namaste, everybody.
Great. Yes. Keen to see the perspective from your end as well. Without kind of wasting any more time, we know that last Sunday, around 10:45 in the morning, suddenly the Nanda Devi glacier broke up and the river welled up near Rainy village. Gush of water, stones, mud flew. So far we know that around more than 30 people have died. I think Hridayesh will give an update on that. And around 175 still not being found as per whatever information I have with me. And the latest I have heard that they are trying to open up one of the tunnels in Tafaban hydropower to see that whether they can manage to sneak out few people who are still alive, hopefully. And it is a reputation. In 2013, around 6,000 people officially died for another disaster in Uttarakhand. And again, same thing happened within 8 years. So we really like to know that what is happening out there. And is Uttarakhand is an exception or the entire Himalaya region is vulnerable? People are talking about climate change. People are talking about the violation of norms. What is? Or is it the kind of agglomeration of everything? So I think let me go straight down to Hridayesh. Hridayesh, you were there. You have been camping in Joshi for last few days. What is the ground reality? How bad it is?
Thank you very much for having me here. I mean, I'm just returning back to Delhi. I started in the morning from Joshi 6 o'clock, and we have not reached Delhi now. But what we are gathering from ground is this, that the tunnel is still being there. They're drilling the tunnel. They tried to make a hole from the upside of the tunnel, and they're trying to send a camera inside to find the situation inside. But they didn't get much success. So they are trying to drill more there. But what we are being told that 38 bodies have been recovered and 19 body parts have been recovered. This the government official told me a short while back. And one more important update is this, that they are trying to also connect the bridge of Rishiganga and the road, so that this is the border area abutting China. So they want to, as quick as possible, to connect this area which is separated from that part of the world as soon as possible. And the third and another important update is this, that the lake at 14,000, much being discussed, that lake can breach and that there may be a repetition of the disaster. That lake is now flowing, the water is flowing through the lake, and there is no, this has been official tweet by the government police officer, the DGP of Uttarakhand. He has sent out a tweet saying that there is no, and a video also, that there is no danger now. That lake which has been formed recently, it's sending out the water, and there is no danger. So these are the few updates. Okay. And as you progress in the show, I will tell you more.
But Hridayesh, before I let you go for this time, but tell us the overall situation. What you saw there, how bad is the situation? We are not in the field, so please let us know what is happening out there. How bad was the situation there?
So, Jayanta, the situation is pretty not very grim, I would say. I mean, to be very careful, it's grim because the villages around the spot, the villagers are very scared of their life. About this lake, they told me much before I got a scientific information about it. The villagers were aware that there is a lake formation happening, and they were telling the story of that particular day, last Sunday. And they said they had never seen in their life kind of disaster when the entire village after village, was roaring with the voice of the water gushing down, and it was full of dust and mud and strong particles. So they don't want to live in these villages. We know, the expert in this panel will tell you that we have hundreds of villages in Uttarakhand who have been listed in uninhabitable. So they are very disaster prone villages. So government now knows it, and they have the list. They have put the villages in the displacement list. How they will accommodate these, how they will transfer these villages, because one of the villages, Reni, I went, people do not want to live there. They are living up in the jungle in the night time in 0 to 5 degree temperature. They are living in jungle because they don't want to live in their houses. So unfortunate. So this is all happening out there. But another question quickly, I want to add, this has also raised question on the disaster management also, because disasters are also changing their nature and their magnitude. So
absolutely, we'll be discussing that. And also, Hridayesh, I will come back to you to know, because I know that you have covered the last 2000 disaster, Uttarakhand disaster also very elaborately, your experience between 2013 and 2021. But before that, let me go through, take the panel once on all, and then I'll come back to you. Let me start with Professor Jayanta Bandyopadhyay. Professor Bandyopadhyay, you are working on Himalayas from 1988 onwards. You see this was going to happen? You feel that this was on the cards?
Very much on the cards. And I do not like that we are blaming nature. What we have to blame is human ignorance about the Himalaya, human willingness to flout the red signals that researchers have been showing. I recall the book Himalayan Dilemma between whether you penetrate into the Himalaya or leave it untouched, because the penetration in the Himalaya will always lead to instabilities. Now, I repeatedly mention that Himalaya is a naturally unstable entity. Firstly, it is vertical formation of any item gives it a fragility. Secondly, a vertical formation is constantly being ravaged by earthquakes. Number two, so one is the geomorphological fragility, one is the geological fragility, then we have the meteorological triggered fragility, where you have 450 millimeters of rainfall in 24 hours. And then hydrological fragility, because this heavy rainfall goes inside the rock system. It acts as a lubricant, and huge landslides are there. Now, Himalaya has never claimed to be a very gentle, stable mountain. But we have assumed that Himalaya will not touch us if we damage the Himalaya. And this is where the tragedy, or what you say, the Himalayan
who are these we, Professor Bandyopadhyay, the politician and the bureaucrats?
No. It's you, me, everyone. We want so-called economic development, economic growth, which is a totally incomplete, unable to project reality index.
Okay.
It ignores ecology, it ignores societal impacts, it only has market value.
So you feel that the ecological concerns have been completely ignored while going on for this mindless development in Uttarakhand?
The good science has been ignored.
The good science has been ignored. I'll come on that because I need to build up on that. But let's go because you have mentioned about the kind of the geological part of it and all that. Let me go to Dr. Santosh Rai. Dr. Rai, you are there, right there. You have been working with Uttarakhand, and I was told by somebody that your team is still working in that area. So, what's your finding? Also, may I bring here a point that there's some reporting have been made that it is not really a glacial lake burst. They're saying that fresh ice could be seen. So there's another theory being kind of promoted why it has happened, and there's also Chinese theory being also promoted in social media. So let us know from you that why it has happened exactly, Dr. Rai, according to you.
Okay, thank you. Actually, this whole episode can be understood in 2 or 3 scenarios, which have been put forward to understand this disaster in simple words. Number one, people say that a large part of the chunk of the old glacier that is also being called as a hanging glacier, but actually it is an old ice which was lying there, and it broke off and it went further down, and it caused one of the tributaries of Dhauliganga, that is Rishi Ganga, to block it. And it started swelling up for next 6-7 hours before it breached again and produced the devastation. Another one, which was suggested by the satellite imageries of Indian Institute of Remote Sensing, Dehradun, which was presented before the meeting with administration. They say that on 2nd February, they did not find anything related to snowfall, but on 5th and 6th February, they do find very large scale snowfall, and which disappeared on 7th at 12 o'clock. So this sequence of heavy snowfall seemed to indicate that this was a case of heavy snowfall which got slumped because every peak and the ridges have some bearing capacity, a snow bearing capacity, and after certain limit, it starts falling down. So that is the and if this entire snow mass is in critical equilibrium, so a small amount of disturbance can cause it, the whole fresh deposited snow to collapse further down. And because they have just demonstrated with the help of some thickness and some preliminary calculation that 1.6 million cubic meter water equivalent of snowfall could have been there. So such a large amount of water when goes down with a very high velocity, and that too under the influence of frictional ground friction, and it incorporates a lot of debris and soil and rock fragment. It is fair chance it can melt that snow.
So you think it's a combination of two?
And
it's a combination of reasons, you
yes,
feel?
actually three. There are, yes, because that part of that hanging glacier they are calling, or old ice core, which was which also inculcated some of the moraine that are the remnant material of a glacier, and it when it actually triggered, and finally it blocked the Rishi Ganga at the junction point of the one of the tributary of the Rishi Ganga itself, that is called the Raunthi River. Raunthi is a nala headwaters of the Rishi Ganga, and it that collapse took place in this.
Dr. Rai, I'm interrupting you because we need to know this because this is a very important point you were raising, that the combination of reasons and the other factors. I'll come to that because we need to need more details. But before that, because of these issues have been raised, before I go over to Professor Dixit, let me quickly go to Professor Dasgupta before that. Professor Dasgupta, Professor Bandyopadhyay raised the issue of the human interference and kind of a development which is non-sustainable, unsustainable development. As an economist, and also as an ecological economist, so to say, somebody who is working in these issues, how do you feel about it? What's your take on that?
Bringing the humans into the picture for a minute, let me first take a moment to say that this is a very sad incident and there have been terrible losses. And just because we have had many such, it does not diminish in any way the importance of this particular event. Having said that, I would like to say that I see two things here. First is, economics automatically seems to mean that we bring human society into it. And that means that we need some very robust analysis and thinking through to see what are the triggers that actually, led to this incident. I hear about all the geophysical phenomena that evidence is trying to put together, whether it's a compound event, it had multiple reasons, and so on. But the plain and simple truth is that somehow all these phenomena have interacted with our vulnerabilities to simply overwhelm all preparedness, resilience, capacities, whatever existed at this point in time in this region. So the economics of it is actually in terms of both knowledge generation and knowledge sharing in this region on what are the learnings for this entire Hindu Kush Himalayan region of ours. And I think I would like to say that the hardships faced by people living in these mountains increases rapidly as environmental risks increase. So two lessons. One is in terms of the fact that this is a natural disaster. It could well be that in this particular case, it is a compound event where all the multiple reasons can be traced to geophysical phenomena, but we need much more rigorous evidence-based assessment to understand triggers.
But Professor Dasgupta, it also raises the question about the so-called development.
I think I'm not clear as yet about that, but what it does raise is, of course, to center stage the fact that our economic system and the environmental system are interconnected systems. They are both extremely interconnected, and at certain points in time, their vulnerabilities combine to simply overwhelm us.
Okay,
leading to huge losses which are not only about human lives. So let's get the economics center stage. It's about human lives. It's about loss of infrastructure.
Absolutely.
It's loss of biodiversity. It's about huge amounts of losses.
Absolutely.
And,
it's a great loss. It's a great loss. And even in economical terms, it was a huge loss.
Exactly. So
Chief Minister has said that 1,500 crores is the initial estimate, which may go up and up. So even in economics, simple economics, it was a huge loss. So loss from all counts.
In economics, if I may, in economics, I think evidence and data is now suggesting from across the world that the investment cost in preparedness and in minimizing these losses in the way we go about our lives is much less than the cost of recovery and the cost of losses.
Absolutely. I'm just taking that point.
That's the economics of it. That's the bottom line of
That's the bottom line.
Professor Dixit, we have to minimize our environment.
We have to minimize that. Professor Dixit, the preparedness. 2013, Uttarakhand, 6,000 people lost life. And you consider all kind of losses, it's huge. 8 years down the line, we are having a repetition. And I really would like to know from this esteemed panel how else the other part of Himalaya is being, in what kind of situation. Your take on that, how you see that from Nepal, what the situation? Is it similar? The developmental paradigm is similar in Nepal, or it is different from India? How it is, Professor Dixit?
Well, when this particular tragedy was ongoing, about a month ago, I was talking with Kavita Upadhyay, who is a journalist based in Uttarakhand. We did talk about the 2013 catastrophe and then what it meant and what are the lessons, so on and so forth. So I had assumed in that conversation that there had been learning, that there had been preparedness, that there was mechanism in place to, for example, look at some of these tragedies and minimize it. I was kind of a bit surprised that the learning seemed to be absent. Now, looking and staying in Nepal and living in Nepal, you feel kind of a truncated reality. You see, you have something ends in the west border and in the east border. And we are part of the Himalayas, and the Himalayas itself is, as Jayanta says, is a multi-hazard area. You have verticality, you have seismicity, you have landslide, you have rock slides, you have snow, you have glaciers, you have globs, you have all kind of, hazards that you can think of. And then, of course, you have now a new threat in the form of climate change, temperature, rainfall, so on and so forth. But the evidence so far seems to me, if you look at the triggerer, the science is still being unearthed. We still need to in-depth examine what was actually the, cause of this particular physical event that came in. Indeed, it was an unanticipated kind of an event, and then it did lead to the kind of disaster that we saw. Unfortunately, the reality is, if you look at last 100 years, if you kind of randomly look at the extreme events, you would find about 50, 60 extreme events in the Himalayan range. Not similar, but not exactly the same, but similar. In 2012, in May, in Seti River in Nepal, we had similar kind of an event where an entire mountain slope came down and then caused similar kind of a devastation. Unfortunately, we considered these events to be episodic. We considered them to be, something that happens and then we forget. There is a kind of a social sort of amnesia, you say. We assume that the Himalayas are all stable, all hunky-dory.
Exactly.
And as Jayanta was saying, we don't understand it. And then we say, wait a minute, this is geologically fragile, it's ecologically sensitive. So therefore, the interventions that you make here is something that has to be sensitive to both. Unfortunately, over the last 30, 40 years, that's not happened. And let me just add by saying, 2020 monsoon, the mid-hills of Nepal from east to west have massive landslides. Now, these landslides were just not natural. It's also triggered by the haphazard way we are building what we call non-engineered roads, what we call dozer roads. It's essentially a dozer driver who takes and builds a road.
So Professor Dixit, so it means that the same thing is happening across India and Nepal. There's no difference out there.
No difference at all.
Same things happening out there. And there is hardly any concern. Professor Bandyopadhyay and everybody is airing the concern that these are all on the cards. But still, we choose to look elsewhere, isn't it?
Somehow our imagination of development is something that's guided by what's happened in the plains, and we kind of transplant that.
Extremely unfortunate, and people are losing their lives. People are losing their lives.
Assuming the landscape, the ecology, the people, etc., will behave in the same way. No, it won't.
Let me take to this. Hridayesh, I hope you are there. Hridayesh, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Hridayesh, you have heard the panelists saying that we are really not considering the threat Himalaya inherently has. And as Professor Bandyopadhyay said, that it's yet to have that kind of maturity geologically also. But Hridayesh, as a journalist, you covered 2013, you covered 2021, this event. Have you seen any change in preparedness level of the government?
Yeah.
Does the government become more responsible, either the local government, local administration, or the state level, or they are as they were in 2013? To put it simply, 2013 learning has been learned or not?
Okay, so I'm not an expert and I'm not a scientist or geologist. I can, as you said, I can answer as, in a capacity of just a journalist. So disaster management has improved. It would be unfair to say that it hasn't improved at all. But it has not improved the way the magnitude and the enormity of the disaster events have increased. So one is that, they have to have a very strong early warning system, very good monitoring. Here we clearly see there are two projects separated by 4-kilometer length, and they did not have a early warning system for the second project, even if the first project was devastated. And now we have at least 40 people, around 37 people are trapped in a tunnel for last 1 week. We are not getting them out. So this says a lot. Number two, that the development model has been much discussed. I won't comment. I will verify it that still we are making dams after dams without totally flouting the environmental laws. Indo-Nepal border, we are making a dam of 5,000 megawatt, which is the total capacity of power generation of entire state. State produces around 5,000 megawatt. This proposed project at Indo-Nepal border is also 5,000 megawatts. So we can understand how big is the dam. People say that it will submerge area as big as Chandigarh, which is capital of Haryana and Punjab. So this is another thing. And also, I want to, add here that, there has to be a relocation of people who are living in extremely vulnerable areas. And that is absolutely necessary because they have a human right to live at safer places. You can't leave them to spend their nights in jungles where all kind of reptiles and and wild animals are on prowl with their kids, and the pregnant women and the old and all kind of sick people. So you can't leave them to live in jungles and preach development model to the world. So this is something which is happening at our backyard, and this is, as a reporter, I can report from ground.
Hridayesh, before I let you go this time, a very quick supplementary question. You said that disaster management has improved over the years. Yes, that's a trend all over the country. We have seen that the disaster management process and the methodology has improved. My point is, what's the point in improving the disaster management while you are actually increasing the disaster potential by 20 times and you are increasing the disaster management by 5 times? What's the point? Is it logical? You are building dams after dams and dams. You are building houses. I myself have seen that in that part, buildings have been constructed right on the Ganges. And when I asked somebody that how come this building can be constructed, he said, no problem. These are all very influential political people. So in one side, you are adding to the threat. In other side, you are saying that we are kind of making better disaster management. Does it make any sense? Does it make any sense?
Jayanta, again, I will not allow my views to come in, and you hit the nail, and I will just support it with one data. In last 30 years, all over India, as you said, this is not a Uttarakhand story. This is a story across the length and breadth of India. more than 400,000 square hectare forest land has been diverted for these development projects in these vulnerable areas. The Arunachal, which our panelist from Nepal was indicating, Arunachal, the fragile area has got 1.5 lakh hectare diverted for development projects. And Uttarakhand is at number 4. More than 50,000 hectare has been diverted for the development projects. So, all development projects all are welcome. But as you said, if you do not do a honest ecological environment assessment, environmental impact assessment, and social impact assessment, you will be inviting danger. So it will be running with the hare and hunting with the hounds. If you don't, care about it, you are causing and not giving the employment to the people, but you are devastating whatever they are left with. So this is a really a plight, and that can be seen on the ground.
Absolutely, thank you. Let me go to Dr. Santosh Rai. Dr. Santosh Rai, as a scientist, you are not an activist, you are not a journalist, you are a scientist. As a scientist, how these dams and this huge construction that's been happening on those zones, according to you, is contributing to the vulnerability or the increased vulnerability of Uttarakhand in particular and Himalaya in general?
These type of dams and other man-made structures which have been made in the upper reaches of the Himalaya is always a matter of concern. However, such threats can be minimized if we conduct some suitable monitoring and understanding in terms of directed studies. For example, this Rishi Ganga project was never studied in terms of scenario-based possibilities that suppose if a chunk of ice or snow mass slumps down, then how much water will generate and what are the ways to handle it. So if such a study was done earlier, so it could have been handled in a better way. What happens, any project in the Uttarakhand region has always a societal development and rehabilitation plans and other things, but it never had a scientific fund or something which could be utilized for purchasing monitoring instrument, and it could be placed at the higher reaches so that they be well monitored. So I recommend here that there should be a component and option for mandatory monitoring of higher reaches which are vulnerable in terms of sudden water discharge and slumping of ice, snow and debris.
I hope these recommendations will go from your very esteemed institute to the authorities, because they need to know, they need to learn that this cannot be allowed. It's the matter of lives of common people, and you can't play with those lives. Thank you. I'll be coming back to you, but let's go to Professor Bandyopadhyay. Professor Bandyopadhyay, you have heard, it's nothing new we are talking about. But do you think that this trend is restricted to Uttarakhand, or it's a general trend? Uttarakhand is only showing the expression. What's according to you the scenario?
Firstly, if there is a flood, and in front of the flood, you have a golden house, it will be submerged. If you have a mud house, that also will be submerged. But in the first case, the loss will be far higher. So to show a far higher loss, it is not nature who has to be blamed, but the ignorance, foolishness, the lack of respect to science is what has to be properly addressed. Uttarakhand is only one part of a global process of worshipping the GDP. And GDP doesn't have any link with ecology, any link with societal sufferings or advantages. GDP has very limited capacity to reflect human situation as a result of human activities in economics. Now here, I would say that we cannot let the climate change issue go, because after the heavy snowfall, there was a period of warming, a very quick warming, as a result of which, according to the French scientists, the snow line went up very much. And where there was a lot of snow, it started melting. So there is an impact of a global failure of greenhouse gas reduction in this. That is upstream of the disaster spot. But downstream of the disaster spot is totally our own commitment to unscientific, arrogant, and economically irresponsible investment. Because if the government is paying, the construction is an end in itself. You make the money and go. Mm-hmm. If some else, a businessman like private industry is saying, not supported by the government, they will look for performance of the project. And if you have a good performing project, a good project cannot be built on bad science. Absolutely. So I go back to Himalayan river science, which is absolutely neglected so far, has to be put in the podium, and we have to respect it. There is no dearth of research publications, but there is a dearth of interest in research publications.
Here, Professor Bandyopadhyay, I'll just ask a very quick supplementary question. You may remember that you actually was instrumental in bringing Sundarlal Bahuguna-ji to Kolkata a few years back, and I was part of that program. And he said that I have been rooting for a Himalaya policy for years and years. But there is no Himalaya policy. Without Himalaya, the entire region, not forget about India, Nepal, the entire region will be at stake. But there's no Himalaya policy. How do you see that? What's preventing us from taking a holistic policy on Himalaya?
Well, firstly, again, you want to extract Himalaya, assuming that Himalaya is a very gentle cow, and it will allow you to milk the cow as much as possible till the cow dies.
Exactly.
Himalaya is not a gentle cow. And this is the problem, that we want to make quick money in building some structure, whether it performs or not. Like the Terry Dam is not performing to the designed extent. But there is no one to question. There is always this garbage drop of natural disaster. Exactly. Everything is natural disaster. I do not think there is anything called disaster in nature if you are ecologically informed. The natural processes are there. Even if there is a huge snowfall, it is a natural process. If there is a mass wasting based on that huge snowfall, it is a natural process.
But the question is, what is triggering that natural disaster? We are triggering the human element.
No. The disaster, firstly, is a wrong term. Natural process. Himalaya, because of monsoon, because of the westerlies, receives a lot of precipitation. Okay. There's nothing of humans. It has been going on for several tens of millions of years.
So you feel that as because we would like to milk Himalaya and to our benefit, we don't need a policy, and rather we don't have a policy. That's always good for us. Let's take that question to Professor Dasgupta. Professor Dasgupta, let's expand the discussion for the time being from Uttarakhand to entire Himalayas. And as Professor Bandyopadhyay is pointing out, that we want to milk it round. And also Dr. Dixit told that. What's your take on that? I'm just reminding you that while that Uttarakhand disaster happened last Sunday, 3 days or 4 days before that, when our national budget was announced in Parliament, less than 1% was allotted to environment. And only a ridiculous 30 crores within a budget of 34 lakh crore was allotted to the climate action plan. Even Bangladesh has 20,000 crore. So clearly the priorities are very clearly cut out, Professor Dasgupta.
Yes, I actually want to link this with one basic idea as to what could be good economics. I think that's the question that I can I feel is emerging out of these discussions. So I think we have to see I'm very glad you brought up the issue in terms of the entire Hindu Kush Himalayan mountain system. And I think there are different aspects to the Himalayas, and how we interpret them would influence the kind of economics we associate with them. At one level, I would say they are majestic, they are awe-inspiring. So in terms of their own natural processes, and in terms of the kind of anthropogenic activities we've already seen, good economics today means that you have to invest in certain amount in managing consequences. We cannot wish disasters away regrettably.
But Professor Dasgupta, who is
I agree
practicing this
with you.
good economics?
So that is
Is the
part of the
government
economics.
practicing the good economics?
No, I'm saying that is part of the economics, whether we like it or not.
Exactly.
Right? But going forward, the other aspect is that we can invest in nature-based solutions. And there's a whole host of understanding, technological developments. For example, we don't have very good decadal predictions of climate change for our region as yet. We don't have technology adoption for early detection of cryosphere changes, whereas these are already coming up. So there is no doubt a lot of scope for picking up and investing in certain things, and these would appear like very good economics. And it is good economics. But there's a more fundamental, I think, way of looking at our mountains.
No, Professor Dasgupta.
And let me just one
sure.
minute,
please go ahead.
if you will allow me, is to look at it as a very valuable natural asset. We don't do this. We don't do this adequately. If you start thinking of the entire Himalayas as assets, and we do natural resource accounting for it, we map, we monitor, we measure, and all the services that we get from the Himalayas.
But we don't do that.
Place it out. Place it in the public domain. We help decision making. We help in developing methods by which economics can handle this, can onboard this information.
Thank you, Professor Dasgupta.
Then you would get better stuff.
Absolutely. But the unfortunate part of the story is the people who matter, the decision makers, they don't see it like in that way. They don't see it in that way as it of now. And we don't see the reflection of this concern coming out in their activity. That's the most concerning thing for, I think, anybody who thinks about the nature. Let's go to Professor Dixit here. Professor Dixit, what's the way out? All of you are talking about that Himalaya is not being, even Dr. Rai as a scientist is saying that certain things should not be done out there. But we keep on doing this. Now, what's the way out? There's always in today's kind of socioeconomics, investing against environment gives you a lot of immediate dividends. The problem is investing for environment gives you a dividend over a longer period of time. So politicians and the executive that come along with that, I'm sorry to say, always invest in short-term dividend. So what's the way out, Professor Dixit?
Well, I don't think there is a single bullet or a silver bullet that gives us a way out.
Yeah, sure.
We first have to recognize that we have a problem. And one of the problems is this deep structural learning disability, all right? I mean, we don't want to learn. We don't want to realize that the area where we live is very different from, other parts. Dr. Bandyopadhyay talked about Himalayan hydrology. Our hydrology is very different from that in the United States or Europe. So the science that we pick up from those areas is not applicable here. And then our investment in science is very, very meager, as you rightly pointed out. As a young student in 1980, I mentioned about, or I used to talk about, the need to expand our hydrological and meteorological network. This young guy coming and shouting all the time, we lost 30, 40 years. We still have very inadequate monitoring stations. We don't even know what happens in one watershed, what happens in other watersheds. Now we talk about climate change. The Professor Dasgupta talked about the cryosphere. We don't have monitoring station in the cryosphere.
Exactly.
You can get technological instruments that's sophisticated that you can install that will monitor automatically temperature, rainfall, precipitation, wind, water level, so on and so forth. But those areas are remote. Those areas are hard to get. You can't visit them every other day. So you need to institutionalize those processes. You need to have those information to where it is needed. Then that gets us to this whole question of institutional governance. As you rightly said, you go and build homes right on the bank of a river. Okay, where is our governance system? Where is the regulation? We have EIAs. EIAs have become rituals. Okay, the EIA recommendation hardly complied with. Policies have been made on simple things like ecosystem flow in rivers. I don't know about India, but in Nepal, nobody complies. Okay, compliance is absolutely zero, and nobody interested in compliance.
No compliance is out there.
So you have a governance system where you don't value safety, where you don't value quality, where you don't comply to your own policies, and then in a very sort of a simplistic way, like Rishi Vasishtha had a Kamadhenu. So we think Himalaya is a Kamadhenu, and then we go on, doing whatever we are
Milking
doing.
it.
Immediate benefit, make money. Bingo.
And just one quick question, I think I will also come to Professor Bandyopadhyay later on that very quickly, is that do you see that enough discussion, enough collaboration between Nepal and India on these tricky issues of Himalaya, including climate change and others? Don't you think that there should be more talks around within the countries?
Am I to...
let first Professor Dixit respond to that.
Yes.
This is something I wanted to share. I think the space for we don't sit together and analyze these issues jointly. It's just not a Nepal issue or an India issue or a Bangladesh issue. It's a Himalayan issue. It's an interconnected hydrology. It's part of the larger connected system. Something goes wrong in Nepal, Himalayas, things go wrong in Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, Bengal, and Bangladesh. I think we need to, and you talked about roadmap. I think one of the things we need to do is to recultivate that process of coming together, dialogue.
Absolutely.
That's
absolutely. I think let's go to Professor Bandyopadhyay. Professor Bandyopadhyay, we talk about with the rivers. We may or may not agree on river issues, but we talk about them. India, Bangladesh, India, Pakistan. But hardly there is any talk on the Himalayas in the government sector. Or even if there is talks, nothing comes out of that. What's your point on this?
When we talk of the rivers, we do not talk of the totality of the rivers.
Yes.
We talk of sharing the water, as in the case of Farakka, but we ignore sharing the sediment. And that sediment then creates problem back in Bihar or downstream in areas in Bangladesh. So we want to milk it. We don't want it to be healthy. We don't want the proper ecosystemic stability. We want to gather a few millions of rupees and run away. So this development, which has been sold very nicely by the media among the mountain people, has to be reworked. And this, my friend Ajaya and I, we are example of India-Nepal collaboration of the most fundamental knowledge forms. We have been working on it, but there is no recognition. But when you talk of Mahakali project, we want to see, how much we are getting, how much Nepal is getting, and Nepali politicians say, India is taking everything.
Exactly.
So for 35 years, we have been collaborating, and it's still a very, very active collaboration of knowledge.
You feel the mountains are nobody's baby? Or everybody's baby?
No, everyone wants to exploit it. So that way, babies have to be still taken care of, but we do not take care of.
Still taken care of. Thank you. Almost I'm coming to the end of my program. Professor Dasgupta, you said that how the good economics and how they should look at these issues. But the unfortunate part of the story is that as I keep on harping on and on and on, that the politicians cutting across the countries, cutting across the parties, I'm not saying this party or that party, they hardly recognize environment as a critical component of governance. They look at environment as a deterrent. Otherwise, an environment minister couldn't go on saying in the public that we cleared today 420 projects. That is not the biodata of an environmental minister. So having known that, as an economist who is also working with the ecological issue, do you see any hope down the line? Professor Dasgupta, very quickly.
I'm an optimist. That's
yes, we all are.
That's the shortest answer I can give you. But to slightly elaborate on it, let me say that from my disciplinary point of view, that I think there are two parallel things we do. One is, as I said, to go on investing in institutions, and others on this panel have also said, and processes that will keep putting out in the public domain more and more information, so that all those of us who do not wake up in the morning to see a mountain from our windows, however, become completely and constantly aware that the mountain is the source of the very water resources, for instance, that supports my agriculture, industry, urbanization, whatever I wish to do, right? So one is to keep doing this in the public domain, and that will help direct stuff in the right direction of investment and financial choices. I really believe that our voices matter. The second thing I would say is there's another way in which good economics can be done. That is to keep expanding the way we do our cost-benefit analysis. And that cost-benefit analysis has to do this continuous onboarding of climate science,
yes,
cultural sensitivity.
That's very important.
Mainstreaming
the concerns.
Indigenous knowledge and the ecological knowledge for the mountains.
Absolutely.
So this continuous onboarding process.
But the only concern, Professor Dasgupta, is when in the last budget, I'm talking about the Indian budget, we have increased our capital expenditure by 35%, and that mostly kind of with the building of flyovers and other constructions. Are we going in the right direction? That's a big question to be answered in future. But let me conclude with Dr. Santosh Rai. Dr. Rai, again, coming to the science part of it, and as you see the Uttarakhand scenario, if you can kind of tell us that how, according to you, the vulnerability of the entire Himalayan region, at least that part where you're working on, what is the ground level situation? And if you have any specific recommendation to make to the government of India or the powers that be, that this should and should not be done in Himalayas right now, your view, Dr. Rai.
I would like to suggest the government that first we have to enhance our monitoring network in the Himalayas, which is the first step towards minimizing the risk of disaster. It cannot be stopped because when the human interference was not there, at that time also such things were happening. And it will happen in future also. But with the our smart way of life and style, we can minimize the disaster's risk. For this, the first step is to enhance the network. And the second one is to maintain some awareness among the people who are residing in the area that what could be the potential risks above the hills where they are living. Number three, that we should also put some mandatory financial levies or budgets on the developer of the project, because we cannot say that we cannot make a single dam in the upper reaches, because if you don't make some power generation, we have to make it supposed by thermal power.
But there should be an optimality.
So how much greenhouse?
But there should be an optimality. How many dams you should make? Dams have to be made, perhaps, but there should be an optimum.
Yes, sir.
You can't go on making dams and making the entire area kind of vulnerable.
Every now and then, yes, that is correct. But we have to make balance, because the high altitude people also have some dreams and aspiration. They want to fulfill it, because if they don't have a school, they don't have a hospital, and they don't have a some energy. We can always tell that Uttarakhand is a forest state, and it should maintain its sanctity.
So basically, what you are saying, the number one monitoring, and you are saying number one monitoring,
yes,
and number two is the balanced way of development. Not so many dams, not so many constructions. You say that dams. There have to be some dams, some constructions for the development sector, but not the scale we are kind of pursuing right now. I hope that's the point you are trying to make. Thank you. I think that's a great discussion. I think 1 day and 1 hour is not good enough to discuss such a critical issue, but I think I was helped by a fabulous panel that I have at my disposal. But the only question comes up that maybe 10 years before, we used to consider this disaster like Uttarakhand is 1 in a 20-year disaster, 1 in a 50-year disaster. Now it has turned into a 1 in 80-year disaster. And as Professor Bandyopadhyay pointed out, that the mix of climatic impacts and also the anthropogenic impact. And the unfortunate part of the story is that Himalaya, which is actually being protecting or being feeding literally this entire region, is taken for granted. It almost nobody's baby or everybody's baby. Nobody has any concern on that. And Professor Dasgupta was talking about the good economics, but the unfortunate part of the story that good economics is hardly being considered by the powers that they are being. And as Dr. Not only India, it's in Nepal, it's everywhere. But end of the day, Himalaya has to be sustained. Without Himalaya, this part of the world will not sustain. And I still remember that Sundarlal Bahugunaji's word that we need a Himalaya policy. I hope this latest disaster will trigger the politicians, the power those be, to know that we need to do something to save Himalayas. Another day, another time. With that, concluding today, thank you. Thank you, everybody.
We should start by saying no natural disaster.
No natural disaster. Thank you.
And the ice melting is actually putting them in danger because they don't have habitats.
Proper specific temperatures and water conditions. They'll leave their main spot to find conditions that suit their needs, which causes less food for polar bears and other animals.
Because entire countries and cities are on the verge of disappearing because of the rising sea levels. There's so many floods.
These places are taking extra precautions to help prevent climate change.
also directly harms humans because other UV and other harmful solar rays can cause many types of problems like skin cancer and immune deficiency disorders.
This isn't really Canada's problem because, as IFAT says, only about 9.5% of electricity comes from coal. So Canada for us to help stop global.
Terrible that factories are doing that, even though they have the money to help fix it. Recently, I heard that the concentration of carbon dioxide in our atmosphere as of mid-2020 is the highest it's been in human history.
Yeah, I heard something about polar bears that live in the Arctic and the ice melting is actually putting them in danger because they don't have habitats. Actually, the sea level...
Huge forest fires because the air is so dry and hot. The trees are practically matches waiting to be lit.
The ozone layer is a layer of gases that exist in the Earth's atmosphere. These gases are used to protect us from the sun and its harmful rays. Since we continue to burn fossil fuels...
This isn't really Canada's problem because, as IFAT says, only about 9.5% of electricity comes from coal.
While much of the world stays home, Canada's fertilizer industry keeps working
and buy solar panels.
to ensure the food we depend on grows better and stronger. Because without fertilizer, harvests would be cut in half. The nutrients in soil must be replenished for the next harvest. To recover from this crisis, the world depends on us. We secure tomorrow's food by fertilizing crops today. To keep things growing, you can count on us. To learn more, visit us at fertilizercanada.ca/COVID-19.